Welcome to the podcast where we discuss all matters financial planning and investing. This content contains general information only and may not be relevant to everyone. Please contact our office to make sure and determine if this is relevant for you.
Hi and welcome to the podcast. I'm David Loughnane, and today I'm really going to talk about one of those things that you really want to avoid making mistakes in your superannuation. Look, it's going to be one of those big things that's going to really help us fund our retirements down the track, and really giving it some love and attention and making sure that you're avoiding mistakes, but also maximizing that, what potentially you can get your superannuation to be, and really what you want to do, what you want it to do for yourself. So, when we create financial plans, it's really understanding that, once we get down the track and, we've worked really, long and hard and all those type of things, we want to be able to enjoy our retirement. And most people are going to get a really big benefit out of superannuation. And that's going to be the main funder for most people, not for everyone, but for most people. So, making sure you look after it. I know when you're in your 20s and your 30s and all those sorts of things, it's like, it's miles away, and superannuation is something not most people want to talk about. But as soon as you get into your 40s and sort of what I call your second phase of your financial life, you want to start talking about it. You want to start investigating it. And obviously you want to start optimizing it to make sure that it's making you the most money it can. And also, we're, as Australians, we're really living longer these days. And it's really important that we, have funding mechanisms. I don't know anyone that wants to live, there with less money once they get into retirement. It's more, some expenses are not going to be there, but being able to do the things that you're accustomed to, you want to, be able to do. So really avoiding some mistakes. So let's talk about the first one, really staying in poor performing funds. One of the biggest things I find is most people don't know how to evaluate if they're in a poor performing fund. So, I always say, someone will say to me, my fund done this, some sort of type of results, and they feel like it's really good. And it's compared to what? So what is the other funds performing in a similar role? So that's where, it's very difficult. Unless you're a financial planner, it's really difficult to sort of compare on a like-for-like basis, how your fund's performing against the next one. So getting there's so many different funds out there, and you'll see a lot of them joining forces, and then some are left on the side, and the ATO talks about really they've got underperforming funds that they highlight and so forth, and different things need to happen. I'd get on the front foot and assess how your actual superannuation is performing against at the end of the day, there's two things that are going to make the biggest difference in your superannuation. One is obviously performance combined with the fees. And the second one is how much money goes in there. So the contribution. So like if you get an amazing return on, $100,000, it's not going to be that much. But if you get an amazing return on $2 million, obviously it's going to be a bit more. So really staying in poor performing funds is not what you want to do. I know it gets in the too hard basket. That's when you can reach out and get some help, from professionals to be able to help you evaluate, see what better options. It's one of those things like we don't charge fees for, any managing our clients' investments into superannuation, so forth. We get paid a fee for service. So, in financial planning, there's no sort of kickbacks and so forth in all that sort of stuff anymore. So it's really getting some help and support on those types of things will really, can be very helpful. Second one is reacting emotionally to, market volatility, and really switching to, probably more conservative or switching at all through downturns. I know there's a lot of people who invest quite aggressively. Everyone's okay to get, big returns, but when the market goes the other way, it can feel uncomfortable, and you can switch at the wrong time and then try to switch back. The biggest problem with that is timing the market is really difficult to do. And, most experts really struggle in that environment. So getting to a position where you can really ride out the bumps. So really, whatever risk profile you're in, really seeing it through and getting a good understanding of how the markets are going. But one of the things through that period, and I just look at it differently. So when the markets are falling and, they happen, I always say the markets step up and they catch the elevator down. So catching the elevator down is really hard to predict exactly when that's going to happen. And just, in the recent sort of drop with Trump, where the market dropped around bit over 10%, and now that's recovered the whole lot really fast. Both actions were really unpredictable, how they were going to go. So being able to, pick those things is a really difficult thing. So if you really can stay consistent with your contributions, and I see when the markets go down, it's really more of an opportunity to buy more because we're buying cheap, because overall the markets will continue going up. So depending on your timeline and all those types of things, really important. So number 3 is really, ignoring the strategic contributions you can be making. So there's, things like downsizer contributions, there's spouse contributions, there's catch-up concessionally contributions. There's so many different types of ways you can get money into super, but also be a benefit going forward, and getting a good understanding. Everyone wants to pay less tax, right? So if you actually get a good understanding how superannuation can help you then, and also help you build an investment for the future, that'll be beneficial for most people. So there's a heap of ways to get money into superannuation. So there's type of contributions, but then actually how you get the money in there and those sorts of things. It can be really confusing, and it really stops a lot of people from doing things. So getting some help around those. So really be careful of the contributions. You're able to make a lot of different ones, and it can really help. One of the other things I'm finding at the moment, it's really talked about online, and there's a lot of people opening up self-managed super funds when potentially it's not appropriate in their situation. And what happens is a lot of money goes in cash, and there's so many people out there really, promoting property investment and so forth in self-managed supers and so forth. And depending on your fund and your position and your risk profile and a whole bunch of other things, it may or may not be appropriate. But overall, there is so much money just sitting in cash. People have put in self-managed super funds, are really scared and petrified to do anything, and they've gone into things. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of scams and so forth out there as well. You'll be extremely careful, especially when you go into self-managed super funds, because obviously you've got the control to really direct the money where you want it to go, into what type of investments. And there's so many different ones that, sound good at the time. Unfortunately, like I was chatting to one of my clients yesterday, and they, way before me, they put some money into a property thing and it fell over. I didn't like it at the start, promising way higher returns and so forth. So, it was probably a bad experience, but there is positive experiences. So there's the two sides of it, but really making sure that if you go down that track, you understand it, you definitely need support on your side, and be really careful in that instance. Number 5 is really like having multiple super accounts. Sometimes it makes sense to have multiple accounts. So like if you've got, sometimes you want to be retaining some insurance you may have in your superannuation in one fund, but there's another performing fund where you can have 2, and it makes sense. And overall fees generally are not such a big deal. So it's more about the maintenance management. And so it can be appropriate to have more than one account, but there's a lot of people who have multiple accounts. And obviously over time, that's not what you want to do. And there's ways to, you can go into the ATO through MyGov into the ATO and combine super funds and so forth. You just got to be careful on the insurance part of it. That's where it gets really tricky. And then obviously you want to be weighing up whether, depending on where you're looking to switch to, is that performing better and so forth. So it gets really tricky in that aspect. So it's not the end of the world having too many accounts, but obviously you want to know why. You want to have the intention why you're having those, and really making sure that, they're working to your best advantage. And number 6, being too conservative too early. Like, the markets over time, especially on your age bracket. So there's a lot of people in what you call default super. So the superannuations are making up or putting you in different things depending on your age and so forth. So it's really, there's a lot of people that go into investments that they should be, if it was in their risk profile and they understood it and so forth, they're probably being way too conservative for a long period of time. And that, over time can cost you so much money. It's one of those things that, like superannuation, for most people, you can't touch till you're 60, and then you got to meet conditions of release to be able to access that money. But, if someone's in their 30s or 20s or 40s, there's a different risk profile from that to being 55 or 60 or 65 or really about to access the money. So there's different stages when, being more aggressive is going to make a hell of a lot more sense, as uncomfortable as it can be through, different market cycles. But to get the best bang for buck and making sure that your superannuation really performs for yourself, you really got to make sure that, you're having enough skin in the game to get some returns and really help your superannuation build up for you over time. And number 7 is really switching when after market falls. So it's all too happen is someone pulls some money out when the markets are going down and they go, oh, I've saved myself a whole bunch of money. But then the problem is they freeze and forget to go back into the market. So their money sits back in cash and the market's gone above where it previously was. So now they're losing money. And that cycle can just stay on and on. And it's, as I was talking about the point before, it's really extremely difficult to pick when those two things are going to happen. And putting them, the money on the mattress, you've got things when the GFC come along, you've got coronavirus come along, and now, most recently Trump. That was a very small blip in the overall market. There is going to be another thing, and those events just keep coming and going. So really, and we get a lot of calls around that time as well. It's extremely difficult to sell out of those times because you don't know when it's going to end, and it could be that day, and then it can just switch around. So really switching to cash and really freezing and getting frozen in those situations can be, cause you a lot of problems. So making sure you've got some help and support around making, the biggest problem with a lot of people is they'll make bad decisions. They'll be making the best decisions they can with the information they have, but it's just not the right information a lot of the time. So you got to be, and that comes down to the next point, really not investing in the right risk profile. So there's so many times we'll look at different investments, look at different superannuation funds, and once we'll do a risk profile with a client, so really getting a good understanding of what their risk tolerance is, what they're currently in doesn't match that. And they'll either be too conservative at times, even they'll be too risky at times. There's a whole bunch of things that people are in that they don't know. So making sure that, if being in the right risk profile over time and taking enough risk is really going to help you, but also getting to that position when you get down the track and you build up enough money to be able to really bring that risk down and be in the appropriate investments and so forth once you go. So it's two sides of it. When you're accumulating, you want to try to be aggressive as you can be. And then as you're getting closer to that time when you're going to start drawing down the money, you're generally going to be easing back if you haven't got to where you need to be. And, there's so many variables around how that actually can work. And then the lucky last one, really delaying switching the money to what's called pension phase. So many people, what happens over our working lives, we're doing what's called accumulating money into our superannuation. So we're putting in money in, we're not taking any money out at this stage. And then once you actually get to the position where you can switch your account to pension phase, if you don't do it, no one's going to do it for you. So it'll stay in accumulation phase. So what that means, the main part of that is that the funds, the income and the growth, if you change anything, is still being taxed, okay, within your super fund. When you switch to pension phase at this stage, all the income and all capital growth and so forth is all tax-free. So there's no more tax to different certain levels. So when you can switch it to a pension phase or the money, that will all be tax-free, and then you potentially can have more in super where you need to keep some in accumulation and then majority of it in pension phase. So that gets a really complicated area. But the problem is with a lot of people, especially once you get to retirement and so forth, understanding what are the next steps. So it's not leaving it in, it's still in a superannuation environment, but you switch the type of account, and then what happens is you're starting to draw down your superannuation money from your superannuation to live on. And there's minimums you need to do and take out of your super fund, even if you don't need the money. And then there's a whole bunch of strategies around, if you don't need the money at the time, you potentially can get the money back in and be just in a much better tax environment. So overall, there's so many different ways to be better off if you take, giving your superannuation some love and attention. And the main thing that I see, it's going to be the main driver for a lot of people getting to retirement, living a comfortable retirement, no matter what, if you've got investment properties, you've got business, you've got share market investments and so forth, generally over time, all those things are going to be sold, and getting a tax-free income from a source such as a superannuation is going to be one of those really beneficial things to look at. And there's only so much money you can get into super, and there's so many different ways to get in it, so it's a hugely complicated area. But today was really focusing on there's 9 things there, and then you could go into probably another 9 problem areas around superannuation and how you need to be looking out for it to get the best result. But the bottom line is whatever you put focus on can improve, and making small steps to get some improvements in that can make a huge difference, when you get time to sort of access and start drawing down that money. So I hope today helps. If you need some help with it, please reach out. Obviously, there's plenty of emails from us and things around. Go to our website. You can look to book in a 15-minute call and see if we can help with your superannuation or anything you would like to discuss. But thanks for watching, and I look forward to talking to you soon.